Have you ever caught yourself waiting for someone who is never truly returning? Not reaching out to them, not calling, not saying their name out loud, but still checking your phone, still reading old conversations, still holding on to a version of them that now exists only inside your memory. If that speaks to something in you, understand this: you are not alone. And more than that, what you are going through is not only heartbreak. It is a call to wake up. This video is not here to force you to move on, because letting go is not something you can command yourself to do. It happens only when you finally understand what you have been holding on to. So instead, let this be a mirror, a reflection of what is unfolding inside you when you continue clinging to someone who has already walked away. We will look at this through the lens of Jungian psychology, through ideas like projection, the shadow, the anima and animus, and the deep archetypes we unconsciously place onto the people we love. Because sometimes the one you believe you miss is not really the person themselves. Sometimes what you are aching for is the part of you that disappeared when they left. You may still be asking yourself, why did they stop reaching out? Why, after everything we shared, did they no longer come looking for me? And this is where the wound begins. Not in the goodbye itself, but in the silence that follows. The kind of silence that gives no explanation, no warning, no closure. A silence that somehow speaks louder than any final sentence ever could. If they had simply told you they were leaving, maybe your heart could have prepared for the impact. But when someone fades without a word, when they vanish like a shadow slipping into the dark, something inside you fractures in places no one else can see. Then the questions begin. Sharp, endless, unforgiving. Why did they leave when I gave so much? Why did they disappear after I stayed beside them through their lowest moments? Why am I still waiting for someone who has already shown me they are not coming back? This is grief, but not the kind of grief that arrives with a clear ending. This is grief without answers. And that is often the heaviest kind to carry, because many times it is not even their absence that hurts the most. It's what their absence triggers in you. That abandoned place you've known for far longer than you've known this person. That echo of a wound that was never healed. Because most people who wait for someone who's already left are not really waiting for that person. They're waiting for what that person once represented. A feeling, a meaning, a mirror. And this is where Carl Jung's powerful concept of projection comes in. You see, when we fall in love, we rarely fall in love with a person as they truly are. More often, we fall in love with the image we build of them, the idea, the fantasy, the role they play in the movie running in our mind. Jung explained that in every person there exists an unconscious archetype of love, what he called thema in men and the animus in women. These are inner figures of the feminine and masculine that dwell within our psyche, shaped by experience, memory, and ancestral patterns. When we meet someone who resonates with our unconscious image of love, we project that archetype onto them. Suddenly, they're not just a person. We believe they are the one, our soulmate, the person we've been waiting for our entire life. But what we're really seeing is a reflection of our own inner world. So the truth is painful, but necessary. You are not waiting for them. You are waiting for the part of yourself that you placed in them to come back. And that will never happen. This realization is the first doorway to freedom. Because the longer you wait for them to return, the longer you remain trapped in a cycle that was never real to begin with. Not because your feelings were fake, they were very real. But the image you created, the ideal, was never truly about them. It was about you. It was about your unmet needs, your hopes, your unconscious desire to be healed from the outside. Sometimes people disappear not because they didn't care, but because you touched something in them they weren't ready to face. Maybe you were too real, too raw, too honest. Maybe you showed them something no one else had the courage to show them before, their shadow. And that is terrifying. Most people do not want to see themselves. They want relationships that affirm the identity they are comfortable with, not ones that challenge it. When you become a mirror, you reflect not just love, but pain, not just possibility, but fear. And when a person is not ready to face their fear, they run. Not because you were too much, but because what you represented was too close to truth, too close to the parts they're still hiding from themselves. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole by integrating all the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, hidden, or ignored, the shadow, the pain, the unhealed wounds from childhood. You unknowingly activated this journey in them, but they weren't ready. So they fled, not from you, but from what you triggered. So now, instead of asking, why didn't they stay, ask, what did I awaken in them that they couldn't face? It wasn't a lack of love. It was fear. It wasn't rejection. It was protection of their own fragile identity. And while you're still waiting, still longing, still wondering what went wrong, they are running. Not because they didn't feel anything, but because they felt too much. You touched their shadow. And when someone touches our shadow, we are faced with a choice: evolve or escape. Many people escape. And that escape is what you now call rejection. But I want you to know this: their silence is not a reflection of your worth. You were not too much. You were exactly right. They were simply not strong enough to meet you there. So please don't dim your light to make someone else more comfortable in their darkness. Don't shrink yourself just because your truth scared someone else. Don't let the absence of another person make you abandon yourself. Because here's the deeper truth: you did not fall in love with them. You fell in love with the feeling they gave you, with the part of yourself you saw in their eyes, with the version of you that felt whole in their presence. And that version of you still exists, not in them, but in you. It is essential to understand that this experience, the waiting, the pain, the longing, is not your fault. It is human. And more than that, it is archetypal. We are all walking stories, shaped by unconscious forces that dictate how we love, who we are drawn to, and why we suffer when those connections end abruptly. Carl Jung called these internal forces archetypes, universal symbols and patterns that live in our collective unconscious. One of the most powerful archetypes we encounter in relationships is the archetype of the idealized other, the person onto whom we project not only our love, but our hope for healing. In your mind, you might still be convinced that this person was different, special, meant for you. But what you are missing is that this idea was less about them and more about the symbolic role they played in your emotional narrative. Were they the savior, the protector, the one who finally made you feel safe, valued, wanted? The truth is, we don't fall for people at random. We are drawn to those who reflect our deepest emotional needs, and often our deepest wounds. Jung wrote that the psyche chooses not what is good for us, but what is familiar to us. And what is familiar is not always healthy. We are drawn to the person who can activate the unresolved stories within us, the wounds we carry from childhood, the roles we had to play to be loved, the silent fears we've never spoken aloud. That's why you might find yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable people. If, as a child, love was something you had to earn, or you might fall for someone who needs fixing. If in your past, love and self-sacrifice were always entangled, you didn't just see a person, you saw an opportunity, an unconscious chance to rewrite an old story, to finally be chosen, to finally be enough. And so you gave your heart with intensity. You showed up in ways others never did. You offered your vulnerability like a gift. But underneath all of this giving was a hidden hope. If I love them enough, they won't leave. And when they did, that's when the real pain began. Because it wasn't just this person who left you. It was the collapse of everything you built around them. The dream, the illusion, the possibility. When you place someone on a pedestal, it's not love, it's projection. And no one, no matter how kind or compatible, can live inside another person's projection forever. Eventually, the mask cracks. The fantasy fades. Reality shows its face. And in that moment, Either a deeper, authentic connection is formed or the relationship breaks. In your case, it broke. And it broke because what you were offering, however loving, was heavy. It came from a place of need, of subconscious fear, of emotional urgency. You may have thought you were giving love, but in reality, you were giving a bargain. I will give you all of me. Just don't leave me. And here's the painful truth. That kind of love overwhelms. Even if it's never spoken, it is felt. The weight of your unhealed inner child, your need to be chosen, your fear of being abandoned. All of that energy was felt by the other person. And it created pressure. A pressure that said, don't leave because I will fall apart if you do. Most people aren't equipped to carry that. Most people will walk away, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to handle the responsibility of being the center of your emotional universe. You may feel betrayed by this. You may feel that you gave your heart and they threw it away. But it's time to consider a different truth. They didn't betray you. They simply couldn't carry what you handed them. Not because they were heartless, but because your healing was never their job. And that's what we so often forget. When we love from our wound, we assign the other person a role they never agreed to play. We make them our source of worth, our proof of value, our emotional savior. We don't just want them to love us. We want them to fix us, to redeem us, to undo the loneliness and pain that came long before they ever arrived. This is not love. This is dependency. Dependency says, I need you to feel okay. Love says, I'm okay, and I choose you from that wholeness. Dependency says, if you leave, I will fall apart. Love says, if you leave, I will grieve, but I will remain whole. Dependency says, I gave you everything, now you owe me. Love says, I gave because I chose to, and I take responsibility for that choice. Most people don't realize they're living from dependency until the relationship ends. That's when the desperation hits. That's when the need to get the person back becomes unbearable. Not because they were perfect, not because they were your soulmate, but because without them, you feel empty. But that emptiness is not new. It was always there. This person just temporarily distracted you from it. And now that they're gone, the void is exposed, and it screams. This is why you're still waiting. Not for them, but for the feeling they gave you. The feeling of being seen, needed, validated. But here's what you must realize. That feeling didn't come from them. It came from you. It was your own emotional energy activated by the illusion of safety. And what came from you can return to you. But only if you stop projecting your power outward. You see, the projection wasn't just about love. It was about control. It was about trying to manipulate the outcome of the story by being perfect, by being indispensable, by being everything they needed. But love that is born from fear always leads to constriction. It suffocates. It repels, even if it's wrapped in kindness, even if it's fueled by sincerity. Fear has a frequency, and others feel it. This is why they pulled away. Not because you weren't lovable, but because the space between you became filled with something that was not love, but fear disguised as devotion. So now, you're faced with the choice. Continue waiting for someone who will never return. Not because they don't care, but because they can't give you what you're looking for. Or turn inward. Begin the real journey, not of moving on from them, but of returning to yourself. Because until you do, every new relationship will carry the same unconscious contract. I give you my heart, but in return, you must never leave me. And that is a burden no one should have to carry. The healing begins not with forgetting them, but with understanding what they showed you. They were not your missing piece. They were the mirror that revealed the parts of you that still feel missing. And once you see that, you stop asking, why did they leave? And you start asking, why did I abandon myself in the first place? There comes a moment, if you are brave enough to face yourself, when you realize that what you called love was something else entirely. It was a silent contract, a deep, unspoken agreement rooted in fear, not in freedom. It said, if I give enough, if I care enough, if I stay no matter what, then you will choose me. Then you will stay. Then you will never leave. But the truth is, no one consciously agreed to that contract. You never said it out loud, and neither did they. Yet, it existed. Beneath every word you spoke, beneath every sacrifice you made. And the more you gave, the more you hoped to secure their place in your life. This is where self-deception begins. Because even if you believe your love was unconditional, pure and noble, and it very well might have been, it's possible, even likely, that it was also rooted in your past pain, in your need to be seen, in your desire to finally be enough for someone who wouldn't leave. This is not a flaw in you. It is a human pattern, one nearly all of us repeat. And until we bring it into the light, we will call it fate. We will say, people always leave me, not realizing we are unconsciously setting the stage for it to happen again and again. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is what projection does. It masks reality. It distorts our relationships. It places people into roles they were never meant to fulfill. It turns partners into saviors, lovers into parents, companions into the solution to a wound that doesn't belong to them. You see, what hurts so much when they leave is not just the loss of the person. It is the collapse of everything they represented to you, the collapse of the emotional scaffolding you built around them, the illusion that this time would be different, that this person would be the one to stay. But they didn't. And that, too, is a mirror. Because maybe, just maybe, the pain you feel isn't only about the present. Maybe it's about all the times in your past when someone important made you feel invisible, unseen, unworthy. And now their silence, their absence, their forgetting. You interpret it as proof that those old wounds were right. I am not enough. I am not worth staying for. People only love me when I give everything. These beliefs don't come from this one heartbreak. They were already there, etched into your emotional body like invisible scars. What this person did was trigger them, bring them to the surface, rip the bandage off a wound you didn't even realize was still open. And as much as it hurts, that is a gift. Because when a projection breaks, it shatters the illusion. And in its place, a new possibility is born. Authenticity. You begin to see yourself clearly, not as someone who was abandoned, but as someone who finally sees the pattern, someone who now understands that what they called love was in part a cry for healing, a hope that someone else could finally repair what has always lived inside. And once you realize that no one can carry that responsibility for you, you stop chasing love as salvation. You stop performing for approval. You stop overgiving in hopes of being chosen. You begin instead to choose yourself. This shift is everything because love that is born from wholeness looks very different than love born from lack. Whole love does not chase, does not beg, does not wait in silence hoping for scraps of attention. Whole love is a sharing, not a transaction. It is an offering, not a performance. It is rooted in freedom, not fear. And this is what you are being invited to discover. Yes, you gave a lot. Yes, you showed up in ways they didn't. Yes, you loved deeply and sincerely. But ask yourself, did you love them, or did you love the way they made you feel about yourself? This is a hard question, but it is essential because if you were truly honest, you might realize that what you miss the most isn't them. It's the version of yourself you became when you were with them. You miss feeling seen, feeling special, feeling needed. And their absence took that away. But here's the truth you must hold on to. That version of you still exists. It wasn't born because of them. It was born because you allowed yourself to feel, because you opened your heart, because you accessed a part of yourself that longs to be expressed. They didn't give that to you. They only reflected it. And if it came from within you once, it can come again. Not through them, but through your own becoming. This is the real path of individuation. The process Jung described as the journey to the true self. Not the self that is shaped by fear, not the self that clings to others to feel whole, but the self that knows its own value, that meets its own emotional needs, that can love without losing itself. The moment you stop waiting for their return is the moment you reclaim your power. It doesn't mean you stop missing them right away. It doesn't mean you erase the memories. It means you stop placing your healing in their hands. You begin to take responsibility for what was always yours. Your worth, your identity, your love. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing someone to complete you, you become complete. And only then can love exist without the weight of unspoken contracts, of silent expectations, of the desperate hope that someone else will finally fix what was broken. People don't break us. They show us where we were already broken. And once you understand that, heartbreak becomes less of a tragedy and more of a revelation. Yes, it still hurts. Yes, grief still comes in waves, but now it carries with it wisdom. Now it opens a doorway, not back to them, but forward to you. Because you don't need to be loved to be whole. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need to be remembered to remember yourself. This is the beginning, not of forgetting them, but of finding yourself. Let's take a moment now, not to reflect on them, but on you. On your part in this story. On the energy you brought. On the reasons you stayed, long after their absence was clear. Because the moment you shift the focus away from why did they leave, to why was I waiting, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim your story. Because this is no longer about the person who disappeared. It's about the part of you that disappeared with them. And it's time to bring that part home. Many people confuse love with loyalty to pain. You think you're holding on because you care, but really, you're holding on because you're afraid. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that if this connection doesn't come back, you'll never feel that intensity again. That sense of being alive, being wanted, being chosen. But ask yourself, were you really seen, or did you just hope to be? Were you truly loved, or did you just try so hard to be worthy of love that you convinced yourself it was real? These questions aren't here to make you feel shame. They're here to bring clarity, because clarity breaks the spell of the past. And it lets you see what you couldn't while you were inside the illusion. You were never powerless. You were never just a victim of their leaving. You were also a participant in your own abandonment by staying when you felt ignored, by giving when it wasn't reciprocated, by betraying your own needs to protect their comfort. You made yourself small, hoping it would make them stay. But shrinking never creates safety. It only reinforces the story that your true self is too much, too intense, too real to be loved. And that Staum is a lie. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. You don't need to be everything for someone to stay. You don't need to fix others to earn your worth. You only believe this because the younger version of you was taught directly or indirectly that love had to be earned, that you needed to perform, sacrifice, suppress. And so you grew into an adult who associates love with effort, with suffering, with constantly proving your value. That's why even now, after all this silence, a part of you still waits. Because this isn't just about the person who left. This is about the child inside you who was never seen in the way they needed to be. The child who learned to chase love because love never came freely. The child who believed, if I try harder, they'll stay. And now that child is still waiting. But here's what no one tells you. It's not your adult self that's hurting the most. It's the part of you that was never allowed to feel safe in their own skin, that was never given unconditional love, that never got to be fully expressed, fully received, fully held. And when this person left, it wasn't just a romantic ending. It was a reactivation of an old wound, one that said, see, I told you you're not enough. You're not worth choosing. But that wound is not truth. It is a story, a pattern, a legacy of unresolved pain. And you don't have to live in it anymore. Because healing does not come from having someone return. Healing comes from realizing you were never unworthy in the first place. This is where the real awakening begins, not in forgetting them, not in pretending it didn't matter, but in waking up to the truth. They were a chapter, but they are not your entire book. And perhaps this chapter hurt more than any other. Perhaps their absence was the earthquake that shook your entire inner world. But the collapse of an illusion is often the beginning of your most honest self. Because what's left after the fantasy dies is you, unedited, unfiltered, real. The self that no longer tries to be good enough. The self that no longer waits to be chosen. The self that no longer begs for love in disguised ways. And when you step into that version of you, everything changes. You stop calling pain passion. You stop mistaking anxiety for chemistry. You stop waiting for love to be proven through suffering, because you understand, finally, that real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. This is the moment you come back to your body, to your truth, to your breath, to your life. And yes, the memories still hurt. Yes, you might still wake up thinking of them. Yes, you might still cry at night. But now, the tears are different. They're not about waiting. They're about releasing. They're about mourning the illusion, not the person. Because the truth is, you never really knew them. Not fully. You knew the version of them that matched your projection. You knew the role they played in your inner world. But did you know their fears, their real limits, their emotional capacity? Or did you just fill in the blanks with what you hoped they could be? That's what projection does. It doesn't see the person. It sees the potential. And potential is not love. Potential is a promise, a maybe, a someday. But real love is grounded in the present, in reality, in who someone is, not who they could be if only they healed, changed, grew. So if you're still waiting, still checking your phone, still hoping they'll reach out, pause, breathe. Ask yourself this: do I miss them, or do I miss who I thought they could become? Because there's a difference. And the sooner you see it, the sooner you return to the only place that has ever been real here, now, within yourself. You are not the abandoned one. You are not invisible. You are not too much. You are someone who dared to love with your whole being. And now, you are someone who dares to love yourself in the aftermath. This is not the end of your story. This is the part where you wake up, where you stop asking why they left and start asking, why did I leave myself? Because the most important reunion is not with them. It is with the version of you that you lost in loving them. And now, it's time to come home. This is it, the moment of transformation, the turning point. Not in them coming back, not in the perfect apology, not in closure being handed to you like a gift, but in you realizing you don't need any of that anymore. You've waited long enough for the message that never arrived, for the explanation that was never offered, for the feeling of being chosen, seen, remembered. But now you begin to see what you were really waiting for wasn't them. You were waiting for you. You were waiting to remember your own worth, to return to your own presence, to reclaim the parts of yourself that you handed over when you believed love meant giving everything, even yourself. And now that you see it, the illusion begins to dissolve. You no longer beg reality to match your fantasy. You no longer romanticize someone who left quietly, who vanished without accountability, who chose comfort over connection. You begin to understand that people don't leave because you're unlovable. They leave because you triggered something in them they didn't know how to face. And that's not your fault. They weren't wrong for not being ready. You weren't wrong for offering your heart. What was wrong was the story you told yourself afterward, that their absence defined your value. It doesn't. Because now you finally grasp a deeper truth. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with what they awakened in you, with the feeling of being alive, being wanted, being held. But that feeling didn't come from them. It came from you. Your capacity to love, to feel, to connect deeply. You were never missing anything. You just forgot that you were already whole before they arrived. Carl Jung once said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And now you awaken. Slowly, painfully, honestly. You realize that so much of what you called love was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that if someone doesn't stay, you no longer matter. But the truth is, someone did stay. You did. Despite the heartbreak, despite the shame, despite the nights you almost gave up, you stayed. And now it's time to return. Not to them, not to the version of you who begged for their love, but to the self that remembers, I am enough as I am, without performance, without pain, without waiting. You no longer have to prove your worth through overgiving. You no longer have to be the healer in every connection. You no longer need to be chosen to feel valid, because now you choose yourself. That means letting go of the fantasy that if you just held on long enough, they would come back, changed. That they would finally see you, that they would apologize, stay, heal beside you. That's not love. That's hope attached to a wound. True love isn't something you wait for. It's something you live. It's something you become. You stop asking, what did I do wrong? And start asking, where did I abandon myself? Because that's where the real pain lives. Not in their leaving, but in how far you were willing to go to hold on to them. In how much you were willing to give, hoping it would make them stay. In how small you became just to be loved. But love is not meant to make you small. Love is not meant to exhaust you. Love is not meant to feel like survival. Real love begins when you stop bargaining. When you stop needing someone else to complete you. When you stop using someone else's affection as a measuring stick for your worth. Real love begins when you look in the mirror. See the pain in your own eyes and say, I'm not leaving you again. And from that space, you rise. Not bitter, not closed, but wiser, stronger, whole. You stop confusing longing with destiny. You stop mistaking attachment for connection. You stop believing that being left means you are unworthy. You understand now. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. You didn't lose love. You lost the illusion of where it lived. And in that loss, something beautiful is born. Your true self. Not the one who clings. Not the one who begs. Not the one who waits. But the one who remembers. Remembers that love is not pain. Remembers that being seen doesn't mean losing yourself. Remembers that you are not invisible. Just because someone else could not see you clearly. You no longer need to be understood by the one who left. You need only to understand yourself. That is where the healing truly begins. And yes, there may still be moments when it hurts. Healing does not mean you erase the memory. It means you no longer depend on the person who wounded you to make you feel complete again. It means you stop waiting for the past to become kinder than it was. It means you begin looking ahead, not from desperation, but from a deep and quiet trust in yourself. Because now you understand. The person you were waiting for was always you. You are your own closure. You are your own rescue. You are your own return. And if today you are still crying, still hurting, still wondering whether they ever think about you, be tender with yourself. But also remember this. They are no longer the author of your story. They were a catalyst, not the ending, not the answer, not the proof of whether you are worthy of love. You do not need a message from them. You need a message from yourself. And maybe that message sounds like this. I no longer love from fear. I no longer make myself smaller just to be accepted. I no longer wait for someone who cannot meet me with the depth I deserve. I come back to myself. Write it down. Say it out loud. Let yourself feel it. Because the moment you do, something inside you begins to change. Your subconscious begins to change. Your energy begins to change. Your future begins to change. And the waiting finally ends. Not because they returned, but because you did. This is not about forgetting them. It is about remembering yourself. And now that you have remembered, never again leave yourself behind just to be chosen by someone else. You are already chosen by your soul, by your strength, by the part of you that survived the pain you once believed would destroy you. You do not need someone to save you. You only need to remain with yourself. Because the most beautiful relationship you will ever build is not with the person who comes back. It is with the version of you who never truly abandoned you. If this message spoke to your heart, do not let it end here. Subscribe and become part of a space where healing, growth, and self-discovery are honored. Every video is an invitation to turn inward, a reminder that you are not alone, that your emotions matter, and that returning to yourself is the most important journey you will ever take. Subscribe now and give your heart the gift of awareness, honesty, and transformation. You have waited for others long enough. Now it is time to choose yourself.